Welcome back to another episode of With Sonar. I am Luke Falasca, joined, of course, by my co-host Kyle Taylor, a.k.a. Mr. Miami, and we have a fantastic lineup for you today. But also, happy Wednesday. It's hump day in the week. We're getting through it. We're almost there, and things are picking up like never before. We've heard that there are some places in the country that might start to reopen pieces of their economy, so some potential good news there. We'll see what happens in the long term, but we'll keep an eye on things. Overall, thank you for joining us. Please submit your comments to us. We'll take comments. But first, Kyle, how are you doing today?
We're back. We're back on our 1 day a week out of the apartment, so that's going to be perfect. Finally get my 1 day, and I'm glad it's with you. If take that as a compliment.
I appreciate it. Of course I do. Yeah. You know, I was thinking, eventually all this stuff will be over, right? Eventually the coronavirus will fade away in some point in time, whenever that is, and things will go back to normal, but we don't really know what that is.
Yeah, I think we can guess. I think we could give our fair guess of what we think's going to potentially happen. We know it's going to be a slow progression into what's going on. I mean, is our volumes going to instantly start coming back into the market? Are they going to be, are we still going to see that slow trickle just like what we did when we started quarantining? Still have to be 10 people, 10 people or less in a room. Yeah. Still going to be certain businesses are allowed open. I mean, the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 approach. So it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. But what do I know?
No, I think that's a good point. But also, I was even thinking a little bit more generic. We have this massive social experiment of working from home, right? So many people are working from home, and obviously there's a lot of jobs, unfortunately, where you can't work remotely, and we've seen that a lot in some of the unemployment numbers, which is very sad. But for folks that can work from home, it'll be interesting to see how many of those really do go back to work, or companies just say, yeah, you're efficient, work from home. Feel free to work from home.
Right, and we're planning on working from home till August, right?
Yeah.
So it's kick your feet back, get comfortable, and make sure you're in a good spot to be able to do your job and be able to work effectively, really.
Exactly. Except for the show, because, well, that would be a little difficult because there's all this fancy equipment that we have to have.
Social distanced.
Social distance. And wiped down a lot of Clorox wipes everywhere. No, good stuff. Hey, I wanted to ask you something. We've talked a lot about the freight market. It's been up, it's now down, and we post a lot on LinkedIn and social medias that there are our guesses or our predictions, right? Are we at the bottom? Where is the bottom? I've given predictions. I know you have. Other folks have. At the end of the day, we don't know what's going to happen. We give it our best guess, but what kind of feedback have you been hearing from folks from some of those posts that we've had, or just conversations you've had with people?
Well, when we're talking relatively towards Sonar, I've been getting a lot of great feedback, honestly, just because Sonar is one of those platforms where it's the most up-to-date data you can find. And so in a time like this, people are reaching out the most. So I'm talking to a lot of people who are extremely interested in utilizing this data so that we can try to start forecasting a little bit and try to get a better understanding of what's going on in the freight market. So, but on the other hand, for people that aren't using it, it's really that phone a friend model. It's try to get a good understanding of like what's my neighbor here doing that maybe I'm not doing. What are you seeing that I'm not seeing? And what a lot of people I'm talking to are seeing is, unfortunately, those contracted loads that they were awarded at the beginning of the year are somehow, some way trickling onto those load boards without them knowing. So it's a little worrisome to have these volumes that you thought were going to be coming towards you, that you agreed upon, you worked on, and then all of a sudden it goes to another broker. So that's been kind of the climate, at least this week, that I've been hearing.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. With rates being suppressed so much, and volumes down so low, and shippers just have so much capacity to work with, they have they're able to basically decide, I don't really need to rely on my contracts anymore to get this freight moved. I can go to the spot market. And yes, I'm going to address the fact that I'm wearing sunglasses right now. So this right here,
Luke Falasca, everyone.
Yes, a pair of sunglasses. Normally I wouldn't do this, but we had some conversations with some folks in the office, and I was wearing them one day in one of our conference calls, a team meeting. This was not with a customer. we had a conference call, and the sun was blaring into one of my windows, and I got a lot of grief for it. And then I decided that, you know what, I'm going to wear these on the show. So I decided to put them on for the show. And nobody thought I was going to.
Yeah, thank God they're off already. Now back to business, I guess we can call it. But I mean, what do you think? What are you hearing? Is it kind of the same thing? I mean, I'm very broker centric. That's my network is a lot of logistics companies, so that's kind of what I'm seeing. But I mean, you can't help but not notice all of the social media postings of trucks in Houston shutting down, saying that brokerages are completely just being unethical and just driving rates down. But in a capitalistic environment, what do you expect? But I mean,
right? Yeah, no, that's a good point. So I talked to a lot of carriers, I talked to a lot of brokers, and even some shippers, and the fact of the matter is freight volumes are 15% lower than where they typically are this time of year. When the coronavirus doesn't happen, when we don't have these black swan events, generally speaking, you would expect freight volumes to be or 15% lower than where they should be, or where they typically are this time of year.
Right.
There's not all of a sudden 15% less trucks, right? There's a lot of trucks on the market, and so yes, shippers are in control right now. I think brokers get blamed a lot. I was a broker before, and I think they get blamed a lot. And that's not to say that there aren't unethical brokers. There are. There's unethical folks in every aspect of life, unfortunately. But I think as a general, brokers right now are getting squeezed. They don't have the margins that they typically have. And on top of that, they don't have the volume to make up for it. A lot of brokers that I talk to, their volumes are suppressed as well as their margins.
Well,
and that's creating a big
margin
tightening.
Percentage is really the indicator for what the freight economy is doing.
Yeah.
Caveat there for my boy JT Engstrom there dropping some knowledge on us yesterday, but that brokerage margin percentage, as you see that expanding and contracting, that really follows what's going on in the market extremely well.
Yeah.
So I think initially last week we saw expansion in broker profit margins, but this week we're seeing contraction in profit margins because now that you saw because being a broker, you're in a perfect situation. You are the middleman.
Yep.
You get to act like the shipper and you get to buy like the carrier. So whenever you see the freight costs really start, or the cost to operate trucks, not to operate trucks, but the cost to trucks going down, margin percentages really start to expand. And then once shippers get that aspect of understanding of like, hey, I can buy better right now, that's where you start getting those brokerages starting to combat each other and really start to compete. And I think that's really the flavor of this working from home and just volumes going down, is that competition is at an all-time high. So when you have a lot of competition in the market, you're going to see price really driven down.
Yeah. No, that's a really, really good point. And the thing with brokers too, they only really have one. They can't reduce their transportation cost, right? They negotiate with carriers to try to get the cost down. Yeah. But in reality, their cost is fixed. Whatever they pay the truck, they only have what's left over. Carriers have carriers can sometimes they have all these variable costs, right? You have maintenance expense. Maybe maintenance can be down a little bit. You can do certain things. You can keep your truck on a steady maintenance path so that you don't have these wild expenses. Fuel expense, fuel's going down, so that should help carriers out. There's a couple of things. That's not to say that it's easy for carriers. It's not, but they do have a few more ways that they can try to cut costs. Brokers don't have that. So when there is competition, just like you said right now, it just drives everything down and eats up their margin because shippers know that I can go to the spot market and just, pay pennies.
And we know what the load boards are. We know what they are. When Luke brokerage versus Kyle brokerage, if we're posting the same load, we are just screwing ourselves over, just because that's alone going to drive price down. If a carrier sees that, then he knows that he's got the buying power and he's got the opportunity to really start to drive cost. So I think go back on that, not drive cost down, but that pushes cost up.
Yeah, no, absolutely, 100%. Let's go ahead and dive into Sonar real quick. There's a couple things that I want to show. So if we can go ahead and populate the screen right now, that'd be great. There's this right here is something that I think a lot of folks have seen before. We've talked about this a million times. But I think it'll really do well to introduce what's happening next. So remember, we've talked about where's the freight bottom. I've done my best to predict it on social media. And again, at the end of the day, I have no idea. It's just a guess. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Sonar tells you as soon as something happens, you can make the best decision. So this chart in front of us, the blue line, that's the overall volume level in the United States. Right where the blue and the green diverge there in the middle, that is the beginning of March. We saw that massive surge up, followed by an even greater decline. It was right about March 1st is when that increase started to happen.
The increase, yeah.
The increase?
Yeah.
The green line there, if you're curious what that green line is, that is 2019 volume level. So that's last year. So we've overlaid last year with this year. Obviously, there's no massive spike there in the first few weeks of March just because there wasn't a coronavirus last year. But we can see where volume levels should be and where they are. So we're about 15% lower than where we typically are. I think that little dip right there that you see at the very end of the green line was the Easter holiday. There was a dip last year for that. For us, we just kept dipping.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
To be honest, this year.
Dipped and kept on dipping.
Dipped and then kept on dipping.
I mean, you
Free
see.
fall.
Yeah. No, you see, we kind of came back up and we thought for a second that we were going to start to see a plateau here or at least a floor, but we could honestly be wrong.
We could be. This is actually something that I talked about where I was like, are we at a freight bottom? Because it dipped, came up, and we just started hanging out. I was like, well, maybe we're at the freight bottom and we're just going to stay here for a while.
Right.
Because you can be at the bottom and not go up. Like, you don't have to hit the bottom and come right back up. That's not very realistic.
Exactly.
But then it looks like maybe we're going to slip again. I don't know.
So if you, as a broker, as a carrier, okay, understanding that volumes are down. So, okay, well, how does that help me make a decision?
Yeah.
So, I mean, what else would you bring up on this on top of volumes that you might use in Sonar to help make a pricing decision?
Well, this is just the volume levels, right? We would, and we know that in some form volumes affect pricing. What we can do is we can go to the rejections. So guys, keep in mind this is just the national level. Okay, we're going to dive into some specific markets here pretty soon. But this is tender rejections. So this right here is a percentage. That blue line is a percentage of what percent of contracted loads are being rejected. Generally speaking, when rates go up, spot market rates go up, you will see more loads get rejected because carriers are less reliant on their contracted freight to keep their wheels moving.
Right.
Because they can get a good rate on the spot market. That's obviously not the case right now. Tender rejections are at 3.32%. If you can see that in the bottom right, that is the lowest level year to date.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a 52-week low.
I believe it is a 52-week low.
Right. So
for sure a year-to-date low, but it might be a 52-week low.
Yeah. Well, even on flatbed tender rejections at a not exactly a 52-week low, not far off though, 1.57%. So that's in the lowest being 1.44, which is, I believe, what happened at the end of last week. Reefers at 5.47, that's a 52-week low. Van is at 3.33, 52-week low. So we're seeing lows across the board, which is a pretty good indicator of price directionality, right?
Oh, it absolutely is. What people need to realize is that when we show these tender rejections, this is like almost real time. Right. That 3.32, that is everything that happened from every load that was offered yesterday by a shipper.
Right.
I mean, I don't know how much closer in real time you want to get, but I mean that your pricing tools are going to update. Most of your price tools are going to update like 2 weeks ago. I mean,
right. No, exactly.
Do you want to know what's happening 2 weeks ago? Anybody can tell you that. You guys ran loads 2 weeks ago. Or do you want to know what's happening today? And you might know what's happening today in your market or your lanes that you typically run, but you don't know what's happening everywhere. And that's where this can be beneficial.
Exactly. And so what I tell people, and I always make these baseball references and analogies, but as a brokerage, I'm not going to tell you how to hit a fastball. Your swing got you into the major leagues, but can we be those metaphorical, Astros banging against the trash can telling you there's a curveball coming? Yeah, for sure. And I think when you get outside of those power networks and get those power lanes that you price better than load board postings and averages. You have the negotiations, but how can you understand when change is happening? And one thing that I think you should bring up is like that the changes in inbound and outbound, because we're just looking at outbound. But when you really want to understand capacity in tightening or loosening markets, it's really in that inbound and outbound change, right?
I'm glad you said that. That's a good segue. I'm going to switch gears here. Go ahead and I got another something here on the screen. We're going to look at Allentown, Pennsylvania. This is an interesting market.
Love Allentown.
Love Allentown. I actually used to move a lot of freight out of Allentown, so I'm a little biased towards this. But I don't know. Maybe that's a good thing. So I moved mostly driving, a little bit of flatbed freight, but mostly driving freight out of Allentown. So the thing about Allentown, it has a phenomenal location because it's roughly like
a
300
DC
miles. It's like 300 miles from 30% of like the U.S. population.
Right.
It's a perfect DC center.
Exactly. I mean, you already have majority of consumers living on the East Coast anyways.
Yeah.
So that being the Northeast, really DC hub.
Yeah.
You have access to all the major highways coming in right there. And then also you don't have carriers that have to go deep into the Northeast because no one's ever getting freight out of New York.
Right. I mean, let's go down the list real quick. Allentown, Pennsylvania feeds freight into Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, DC.
Yeah.
I mean, those are giant metros. Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
But this right here, this chart, the blue line, that's the outbound volume level out of Allentown, Pennsylvania. Now, go ahead. If you guys can see this, check this out real quick. Let me put this up year to date. You can see that blue line? See how far above it is above the orange line? The orange line
is it? So blue line's what?
Blue line's 2020 volume.
Okay.
The orange line is 2019 volume.
Okay.
So right at the beginning of March, just like we saw on the national scale a second ago, the blue line surged up. Guys, that's not normal. Those volume levels are not normal. You need to take that and throw it away and just pretend it never happened. But where we are right now, we've seen volume levels at a national level dip 15% below where they were this time last year.
Right.
Allentown, Pennsylvania is like about 20% above where it was this time last year. And they're still hanging out that far above. I mean, look at that. I mean, that's fantastic. It's a great place to be.
Right.
And that's just the outbound volume. Let's check this out. Kyle, you were telling us a second ago about inbound volume. Why is that relevant?
Yeah, so when we're really understanding, I think everyone can understand this when you're trying to play the capacity game and have an understanding of what's going on in your market. It's understanding how many trucks are coming in, how many trucks are going out, and so when you're looking at outbound volumes, that's where your freight markets are. That's where you as a broker, as a carrier, you want markets that have high volumes coming out of it. So that are manufacturing, that are being able to move your trucks or fill your trucks. What you want to look at is inbound volumes. Inbound volumes are going to tell you trucks that are going to be entering the market, and that's extremely impactful because when you look at markets that may ebb and flow, you're going to see capacity changes with that. So when you see, for example, what did you have up? So if you see like a market with inbound volume starting to surpass outbound volumes, you're going to see more trucks entering the market than leaving it. So that's going to tell you that a downward pressure or a loosening market's occurring. And so in a normal market, that's going to drive price down. You're already seeing price driven down already, so I don't know how much more price is going to be driven down. But a key indicator for understanding your negotiating power, I think if we're boiling it down to anything, it's how much negotiating power do I have and how profitable can I be?
Yeah.
And so that's why those two, on top of that carrier sentiment of tender rejections, is extremely impactful.
I think it's more than rates too. Rates are so important, but that's not the be all end all. And I think you said it, and I don't even know if you realized you said it. So you have when inbound volumes surpass outbound volumes, yes, rates tend to go down because there are just more trucks going into a market than leaving the market. So you have your pick of trucks to move your freight.
Yeah.
Right? That gives the power to the shippers and brokers.
Right.
Right? But in addition to probably applying downward pressure to rates, what it'll also do is it just makes it harder for carriers to find loads.
Right.
And they potentially might have to deadhead further to get a load. So not only are rates going down, you're also reducing your chance of even getting a load right away. You might have to wait a day. You might have to deadhead out a little bit.
We're
that's
talking
very
about
costly for a carrier.
Asset utilization. So you want to be able to, keep your truck as full as possible. You want to lower the amount of empty miles, especially right now. We're seeing average length of hauls of carriers go up. We're seeing profitability per truck per week go down. So it's a very interesting time right now that we're in, because the carriers being very, average operating ratios are above 100 right now.
Yeah.
And then you have all these brokers competing against each other. That's going to be driving price down. So it's really a perfect storm. That's just it's just a cyclical cycle of it's eating itself. The snake is continuing to just keep going in a circle. Yeah. So what do you do?
Exactly. Well, you get Sonar, so you know what's happening everywhere, right? Yeah. Hey, that's my little sales pitch. No, but let's go ahead and look at the chart real quick. I put up something. So notice the blue line we were looking at a second ago. That's the outbound volume out of Allentown, Pennsylvania. We saw it's way above. The green line now, that's the volume going in to Allentown. Notice how much higher the blue line is right now from the green line. It is so much higher. Man, that's a massive gap.
That's a carrier's dream right
it's
there.
Actually, it's actually just as high right now as it was during the peak in the third week of March when we had that massive surge. Capacity is not any looser now out of Allentown than it was 3 weeks ago.
I mean, would you say it was tighter? So inbound volumes is green, so you're seeing less inbound volumes, less trucks entering that market, more freight. I mean, still a lot of freight. It's coming down compared to 2 weeks ago. It's hard, like you said, throw out those volumes from 2 weeks ago to compare against, because that's nothing to compare against.
Yeah, that's not going to happen again.
But you're seeing less volumes coming into the market.
Significantly less. Some of the lowest we've seen all year, in fact.
So that would be if I have freight in that market, that's going to tell me that carriers have a lot of options.
A lot of
optionality here, and so which is good for a broker that you have a lot of options too. But you really have to understand the market that you're going to, the back end of this load. Okay, the outbound market's great, but where are you going to?
And let me show you what this translates into. So right here, this orange line that I'm throwing up, check this out. This is going to blow your mind. So
Throw
this
it up
is
like Michael Jordan, right?
Yeah, right? There you go. Alley-oop.
The last dance.
This is tender rejections. So the orange line is tender rejections. It's sitting right here. It's high. It's not at its highest point for the year. It's not at its lowest point so far this year. It's kind of somewhere in the middle. Again, minus this ridiculous spike that doesn't normally happen. It's sitting at 6.2%. That's almost double what the national average is right now.
Right. But look at the line. I mean, it almost looks like it's right in line just before COVID-19.
Right in line. Maybe even a little bit higher. We had a dip right before COVID-19 happened at the beginning of March. We're above that dip right now. We're well above that.
Yeah, so comment below. Anyone out there, handling any Allentown, PA loads, are you seeing that price is about average pre-COVID-19, or is it below? Because tender rejections are a proxy for spot market pricing, so we're seeing it drive down. So I'd be very interested to see what.
And don't compare it to 3 weeks ago when we had this massive surge. Compare it to like 2 months ago.
Rates are in the dirt. It's not $4 a mile. What?
Yeah.
What am I talking about?
Let's compare it to like February, right, when things were pretty normal, right?
Right.
Okay. This is good stuff, man. I love this kind of thing. I mean, there's so many opportunities here to know, right? Not all markets are created equal. I know we're getting towards the end of time here. So, Kyle, any last thoughts or any things you would say to anybody before we turn off here?
Well, like you were saying, not all markets are equal. Especially, I mean, Allentown, PA is just about 3% market share, so they make up about 3% of the total outbound volumes in the United States. It's a significant piece of the pie. I think that's like top 5 market in the United States right now.
That's a big deal.
So, I mean, when you're seeing these kind of movements, you've really got to pay attention to it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, last minute, I mean, how's your LinkedIn game going these days?
It's doing okay.
Yeah.
Whenever I post, the last post that I made, I think was a prediction that we were at the freight bottom, which, by the way, I have no idea.
So you've been MIA lately since that video?
Well, that was yesterday.
Okay.
Well, no, when I make those predictions, my goal is not to be right. My goal is not to be right. If my goal was to be right, I'm in the wrong business. My goal is to create conversation.
Right.
And I think there's been a lot of folks that have given really good points and arguments, because everybody's affected differently in the freight market, and that's what I want. I want to draw in those folks that are seeing something different from me, because I can only report what I see.
Right.
Right. And that's what I want. I'm trying to get conversation.
I guess it's a good thing you have the largest segment of contracted freight data at your fingertips.
Boom.
Very good to be able to see that. Bust down those 4 walls.
Awesome stuff. Well, hey, we're gonna close up here. Kyle, thank you again for joining me. I apologize to throw you off when I threw my sunglasses on. It was a good laugh. But anyways, folks, thank you again for tuning in. We're live every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern time. Please join us. Leave comments. We'd love to hear feedback. Also, if you want to see Sonar in action, get a real live demo from myself or Kyle or some other folks here, we'd love to show it to you. Leave us a comment below, or you can even take your phone and scan the QR code in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, and that will set you up with a demo right away. We're happy to show it to you. We want you to make more money, especially in this market that we have right now, so any resources that we can give you to help out is a win. Thank you again. Have a fantastic rest of your week, and we will see you next Wednesday at 4 p.m.